Today on Locked On Rockies, back-to-back sweeps at home, and not the good kind.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 17th day of June in the year 2022. I'm Paul Holden, your Rockies fan extraordinaire, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk. Following this team on the Locked On podcast for over a year now and been working in the radio world for quite a bit longer. You can follow all sorts of stuff of what I do at Paul Holden 33. We thank you for making Locked On Rockies your first listen of the day. You can find us free and streaming on all your favorite streaming services, as well as live streaming on YouTube, and all your favorite Locked On podcasts are there as well, just like the Locked On Guardians podcast. And today on Locked On Rockies, the host of Locked On Guardians joins us. Let's bring him on to the show right now. Jeff Ellis from Locked On Guardians. How's it going?
And for me, it's going well.
Maybe you're in a much better mood than I am.
So much for Rockies fans. We were talking beforehand. I'll say, though, you have us beat on announcing. My personal story for Rockies fans who maybe don't know this background, it's how to make it quick. But like as a kid, I didn't have cable, and we had like WUAB 43 would have Guardians games on weekend. It was literally the only way I could watch baseball. And it was Jack Corrigan and Mike Hegan. Now, Mike Hegan would go on to be a radio guy. His dad, Jim, was a catcher. But Corrigan was like, for most of my life, my favorite TV guy. And when UAB lost it, they had to make a decision who to keep between Rick Manning and Jack Corrigan. And I'm still to this day bitter that they kept Rick Manning, who means we lost my favorite announcer because of him. And it's also why the Guardians had to trade away a 21-year-old Dennis Eckersley because of Manning. So it's, it's the fun stories that don't go away. But yeah, that's I intentionally spent. I'm going to go back and rewatch today's game. I didn't get a chance to during the day, but I watched all of these with MLB TV using the Rockies radio to hear Corrigan. Because again, he's the voice of my youth. So that's kind of some background. Some you might have lost all three games, but you still have the better announce grouping.
And we'll take it's funny you say that that he's the voice of your youth, because he's the voice of my youth too, because the entire I don't remember a Rockies broadcaster before Corrigan. He's always maybe I wasn't paying attention enough, but when I listened to Rockies games, when me and my dad were listening, when I would listen to Rockies games in the car, it's always been Corrigan. That's all I can remember. And I actually really didn't know about his Cleveland ties until relatively recently, actually, after after he passed the milestone of 3,000 games. And he calls a good game. I mean, I don't think the Rockies broadcast is necessarily, quote unquote, anything special, but I think they call a good game and it's entertaining. I often like the radio broadcast. I think the TV side's fine enough. I'm not always the biggest fan of some stuff, but I think the radio side's a pretty darn good broadcast.
Yeah, Corrigan was there from like 85 to 2001. I'm 40, just as a background. So for me, it's like I was class of 2000. So it's like, right as I was going away to school and, got interested in other things in sports, went a little bit more back burnery for me, was when he left. And just as an adult now, I'm like, man, and I'll say this, like, I was impressed to hear like the talk about guys barreling and exit velocities. And this is kind of like the dirty little secret in Cleveland. We have one of maybe the most analytically driven model-based front office in baseball, a highly successful one. I mean, you can go and look at half of baseball almost is run by former people from Cleveland. I mean, the Rockies at their peak of success, I'm not always that impressed with Dan O'Dowd when it comes to like the draft. Not my favorite guy, but he was a Cleveland guy. That's where he came up. And we have announcers who never mention, none of that. We hear a lot about RBIs, and I get it. Part of it right now, and the reason they're really pushing RBIs is because Jose Ramirez is near the lead in that. But I mean, just to hear the Rockies broadcast, maybe the Rockies fans got a bit annoyed, but it was also nice just to hear the Jose Ramirez love and the talk about the fun fact where it's like, he's got more doubles than strikeouts, or he's got almost as many home runs as strikeouts, and talking about appreciate it is all I'm saying.
Mhm.
Like there's most people I know in the, I don't know how you quantify like the blogosphere, like not the non-official media. The official media is a lot. I mean, there's some people like Zach Meisel and Ben Axelrod who do amazing work. There's definitely an older generation who doesn't like know anything from like 1985 or later.
Mhm.
They haven't adapted and grown with it. So for like the younger generation, like it's just a general rule. If you have MLB TV, you listen to the other broadcast. Like it's sad, but it's true. So that's
Man.
what it's like as a Cleveland listener. I love Tom Hamilton. He does a great call of the game, but it is definitely none of them. I believe when like the Atlantic, when the Athletic did their rankings of announcers, Cleveland was like bottom 5 for it, and there's a reason.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. Our analytics, our broadcast talks more about analytics than I think our front office cares about analytics, because the Rockies desperately need an analytics-driven approach. That was actually our podcast all day Thursday, was talking about how another story comes out about a player leaving, in this case, Yency Almonte, a reliever for the Dodgers, leaves the Rockies, gets introduced to a bunch of stuff that Colorado wasn't showing him. And what happens? He turns out to be a pretty darn good reliever for another NL West rival. But let's hone in on the game. And, Jeff, a big sweep, but I got to say, a pretty ugly series of baseball for both teams. I don't really think either team necessarily thrived. There were players that had great performances. There were things to enjoy. But in terms of quality baseball for these two clubs, I would say this was kind of a dud of a series.
Yeah, it was. I agree. I mean, it is funny. Like I always respond to every YouTube comment, but I was like, and someone's like, "Hey, be positive. It's a fun stretch of baseball." I'm like, I can't be like, they tried their darndest to give away this series and they just couldn't do it. I mean, just odd. Like all 3 games ending on double plays. I don't think I've ever heard of a series where
Right.
that happened before. I don't know if anyone, like if a scouting stat has said if that has ever occurred, but it's just an odd series. It was very messy. Luckily we have Jose Ramirez and he was spectacular. Ahmed Rosario has really struggled this year, but that was something else I found out from the Colorado Rockies broadcast, is he has always, even back to his Mets days, murdered the Rockies. So those two were able to carry him through. But yeah, I don't think either fan base can sit back and be like, those were fun. I mean, not necessarily not fun to watch baseball, but that was maybe the dirty, the opposite of clean is dirty, but that sounds wrong to say it was the dirtiest series of the year. But, it was definitely it was definitely, for me, I think it was the sloppiest series I had seen for the Guardians, especially with one where they win, let alone sweep it.
Yeah, and I mean, the Rockies didn't do themselves any favors. Drop balls today, multiple errors, extending a franchise-long streak of errors committed at home. Elias Diaz literally throws the game away. They're trying to throw down on third. Charlie Blackmon doesn't read a bobbled ball. It's just stuff that simply can't happen. And, but here's the deal, kind of on the flip side, Cleveland's the one winning those games, and winning those type of games, those ugly games, matter in the long run. And Cleveland now gets a nice boost above 500. I mean, you might not feel great. You feel great about the 3 wins in a row, especially on the road. And I believe you mentioned a home run prone pitcher not giving up a single home run in Colorado.
Yeah, Tristan McKenzie. So he's been, arguably their best pitcher this year. And the last time he had not given up a home run in a game before this was May 7th. He gave up 2 in Minnesota, 1 in Houston, 2 in Detroit, 3 in Baltimore, 2 in Oakland. I mean, as a matter of fact, the last time he didn't give up multiple home runs was May 23rd. May 1st to May 7th, no home runs. And then his first 3 starts, no home runs. I mean, he's been averaging more than a home run a start. So it was unusual. I expected at least 1 home run in this one. And Eli Morgan's been spectacular this year. So, but his minor league data was always very home run prone. And even last year is very home run prone. And both of those guys pitched in this game, and somehow neither of them managed to give up a home run.
If you want to hit a home run for your health, well, I got the product for you. It's called Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens is one delicious scoop of 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. All the things. All you got to do is drink this down before you eat anything and start your day, and you're going to see a lot of benefits, especially when it comes to energy and for your health. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy free, or gluten free. It contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, while still tasting good. Athletic Greens has over 7,000 five-star reviews, and it's recommended by professional athletes, trusted by leading health experts such as Tim Ferriss and Michael Jarvis, I should say. I think that's the name. Athletic Greens is a climate neutral certified company. And right now it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/MLB network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/MLB network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Jeff, I'm curious here from why the bullpen especially, and I know you didn't see this game, but why what makes that cutter so special? What makes this Guardians bullpen so special to keep the Rockies off the board when they have multiple opportunities in the game late to score some runs?
It is a bullpen that has really come together this year, if I'm being honest. I also appreciate the broadcast when it's like, former Rocky Brian Shaw. It's like Brian Shaw and Jake McGee, I talked about on the show yesterday. It's like neither of them worked out. And then Shaw work out. Last year he was fool's gold and he fell apart at July 1st. We'll see if that happens, but he's been great for them this year. So Eli Morgan is like one of my big brag points because first off, back during his draft class, I was a draft and prospect writer at 24/7. And I literally at the start of the 8th round said, hey, at Guardians Twitter, like, isn't this the round where you're supposed to draft Eli Morgan? Because he fit all there. And then they promptly did. And from that moment on, I've been like, okay, he's got honestly a 70 grade changeup. Put him in the bullpen, see if it plays up. Now, a lot of people talk about maybe we take him out of the bullpen. He's been so good. This is a role I've been calling for since literally he was drafted. I'm like, put him in the bullpen, fast track him. He is their most valuable reliever. Class A has been solid. He seems to always get into a little bit of trouble. And even though his stuff is ridiculous, he doesn't miss as many bats as people expect. Morgan has been the glue guy. Trevor Stephan still has a chance to be the greatest Rule 5 pick in franchise history because they've had literally zero success with the Rule 5 draft. They've lost many a good player, but I think you got to get better than 2.5 WAR for a career to be the greatest Rule 5 draft pick in Guardians history. That's how poor they've been at it. Well, having someone like Anthony Santander with Baltimore is a recent loss, who's definitely better than that. But, he's really the new pitch has worked well for him. He's come in. Sam Henches is someone I actually called for to be released in the offseason. They worked with him a bunch. I feel like it's the coaching and you get down to it. It's again, how well they do with just the coaching internally. And it's not just here. What's happening with the Yankees with Nelson, right? Nelson, or is it Nestor Cortez, who's the Yankees pitching coach, Matt Blake, who, brag moment, is a Twitter follower of mine from his from his Guardians days. San Diego went and got Ruben Niebla for a reason from the Guardians this offseason, and Cleveland was actively mining San Diego for pitching because they knew they couldn't develop. It's just putting guys in that right role, figuring out what the limit. There is so much data now in the game. It's made things like drafting, it's made things like development easier to a degree, as long as an organization is smart and knows how to kind of take that data, but more importantly, also knows how to then teach that data. There's a lot of organizations, and it's not just Colorado. Like I remember having discussions with Mike Clevenger when he was a guy in AA no one cared about because he had been traded for Vinny Bastano, who was already viewed as like a dead arm. And Clevenger talked about, yeah, when I went to the Angels, they gave me a binder. When I came to Cleveland, they like showed me videos of how I pitch and how I need to like change A, B, C, and D to be more effective. Like it was night and day. And it's stuff like that. Like they sat down and really worked with these guys, and they completely rebuilt this pen with guys who are already here in undefined roles. And they've got 5 really interesting relievers sitting in AAA. None of them huge prospects. None of them. Nick Miklajak is probably the biggest name prospect, but they've just, you got a left-hander, Andrew Miziakis, small school guy, but he just graduated from AA where he was striking out almost 50% of batters with a walk rate under 2. Like they know what they're doing. They can put it together. It's a nice situation to have. And honestly, no matter what they do, they're going to lose probably 2 to 3 guys in the Rule 5 draft at the end of this year just because they built up so much and there's nothing. The depth is unreal, and it's just going to stay that way unless they can find some kind of all-in trade to make.
Why are teams like the Guardians why are teams more willing to accept that? Why are the Rockies so stuck in their ways? I often bring it back to the fact that it's Dick Monfort and his loyalty, and it's his club. I really think that's the core of the problem, especially when the Rockies this offseason bring in some people to beef up this analytics staff, and most of them leave within a year, which means I'm just assuming, but Dick Monfort's coming in there, getting his big old greasy paws in there, trying to mess around with things that he has no business doing. Why are teams like the Guardians more willing to do this? The Rockies are screaming for an outside, fresh air, unique perspective to make this team something special. And yet they're still, the story of 2 years ago is analytics department was doing the laundry at the same time. I'm just curious if you have any ideas what it was in the history of the Guardians that just made them decide analytics, this focus, we need to do this.
I actually have a kind of a funny Rocky story if you want to hear it when it comes to the draft and
Please.
scouting. So again, I wrote for Scout in 24/7. I replaced Kylie McDaniel at Scout. It's kind of, and it was a very cool experience for a lot of years before those sites unfortunately got rid of baseball. But my home place to scout was Kent State. And this was like back Eric Lauer, Kent State, Zach Plesac at Ball State. It was a good time to be around there. And I remember going to a game and I'm sitting there and I'm with a scout for the Angels, and he and I are discussing Connor Capel and Taylor Trammell, because that's both when they were just popping. Like this was before Trammell was like really a name. And he also asked me about Brian Reynolds, and we both agreed he was kind of a meh player. So it's not all perfect with me. I'm not going to sit back and I gave Brian Reynolds like a late 2nd round grade, and I go, he doesn't hit enough for the corners and he's not a good enough defender for center. So, I can be honest, but the scout agreed with me. He was there, and it was an Ohio State game was in town, and Ohio State ended up having 6 guys drafted that year. Ronnie Dawson was a 2nd round pick to Houston. The Kent State had 6 guys drafted that year and like 4 guys drafted. So these were like pretty loaded squads. And I'm discussing prospects with this scout who's, getting data the whole time we're discussing. And it's an older gentleman, but he's still like clocking times and doing this. And the Rocky scout is having a very loud discussion about Dan Uggla's wife. Like the whole time. Like I heard these stories about like Dan Uggla's wife that I won't get into because it's none of my business to share that. But these were 2 very loaded teams. I got to hear all about what Dan Uggla had gone through with his wife and some other stories. And then I also got to hear how he was pissed at everyone because he had just come back from scouting Joe Adell and they had made a moronic move. And I think that was the year they signed, I'm blanking on the guy from the Mets, and lost their 1st round pick, the 2017 draft. And I don't know if Adele would have been there or not. I'd have to go look at it. But it's like, I don't know how much of the game he was watching or following. It was just it was like the very basic, like looking at the notebook. Cause you do, if you can swipe a look, you're curious to see. It was like just all the scouting cliches. And then it was just him discussing someone's wife and their craziness. And then me and this other guy discussing who the pop-up players are. Jose Miranda was someone we also discussed who had just popped up, who's with the just got the Twins call up, and we were talking about, like I said, it was Connor Capel and Taylor Trammell were kind of emerging, and we were just going through and talking about players here and there. He was, and the other guy, the scout was there to get Tim Montgomery times, Ohio State center fielder. But yeah, it was, like I said, 12 guys in that game got drafted, and I don't know if the Rocky scout watched half of them. So, that's kind of what you're dealing with. I know it's not necessarily for the Guardians, why did they get into the stats? It's just, it wasn't John Hart. He gets a lot of credit, but actually that entire core outside of Kenny Lofton, he inherited. And then he just had the smart people in place, and they slowly kept integrating more and more. And last year when we did the green room stuff, I actually had someone who used to work with the Guardians hop in. He was trying to recruit me to come do the other website, the clubhouses. And he was discussing how, even in the 90s, the Guardians were doing stuff with videography that would be getting them in trouble now. Things similar to what the Astros did. They just always had the right people in place. And I think the best thing you can say, I know I'm talking forever and taking the whole mic time, but for all the annoyance with being a small market team and an owner who won't spend in a bottom 5 salary, is it's a really easy place to work. And, Chernoff was heavily recruited by the Mets. And at the end of the day, and he's from New York, it was a chance to go home and run the team he rooted for as a kid with a billionaire owner with bottomless pockets. And he chose to stay in Cleveland and be the secondary guy because it's a comfortable place. It's a place where they know they don't have to deal with stuff. So I think for as much as I'm excited for the Blitzer news that came out today, I think it's great to not be one of the poorest teams in baseball. But my one concern as a Cleveland fan in general, it's we all hated Al Lerner and then Lerner's son, who I'm blanking on, until we got Jimmy Haslam, who made it a complete poop show. I think I can still say that word in Cleveland with all the stuff that has happened there over the past few years. And yes, Dolan probably can't afford to own a baseball team, is what it looks like. But at least he's just stayed out of the way of management, and the team's been successful, and they've kept their smart people, and the smart people want to stay there. And they don't, they do have a lot of people who get grafted off, and Matt Blake, Ruben Niebla, Carter Hawkins, Ross Atkins, and Troy. I mean, they're all over, but it's maybe the best skill in terms of what the people at the top do is identifying talent. And it's a never ending train of that. And they're always willing to listen, learn, and adapt.
People want to stay in Cleveland, whereas people in the front office of the Rockies sometimes want to get the heck out of there. And Mark Horning in the live chat says, Paul was talking about smart clubs and the Rocks' failures in that regard earlier today. On another note, the Rocks extended their current consecutive errors at home streak to a franchise record at 13 today. So again, the one thing I think the big takeaway there is the Guardians have to deal with more of the small market thing. The Rockies are not allowed to hide behind small market anymore. They are not allowed to hide behind attendance, because this team will still be a top 10 team in attendance at the end of this year, whether they finish fighting for their lives to the third wild card spot or 20 games below 500, because people love to watch baseball in Colorado, whether it be the Rockies or the team that's in town, which is usually the team that's in town. But hey, if you want to make a little bit of extra money on your next sporting event, maybe you can try Bet Online. Try your luck at betonline.net. It's your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including this year's basketball championship matchup. Well, you might want to get those bets in, because it looked like Golden State was going on quite the run while we're recording this. But also the Avalanche in the NHL finals as well, if you want to bet on that. Major League Baseball all season long, and the latest fighting news from MMA to UFC and boxing. Bet Online is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, the esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action at Bet Online. Bet Online, where the game starts. Now, Jeff, I want to ask, are you surprised by the Guardians this year? The Guardians, 32 wins and 27 losses now after sweeping the Rockies. I don't think there was necessarily a lot of talk of the Guardians being a good team or a lot of really buzz around them, but sitting 5 games above 500 in a division that seems to have some kind of people underperforming, the Guardians seem to be in a pretty good spot as of June 17th.
I said they'd win about 88. That was my call. And my thought process on that was they literally lost nobody, and the youth is starting to hit, and there is so much of it. We got in this debate and we did our crossovers internally, and everyone, it's like Detroit's got Spencer Torkelson and they've got these 2 big names. And, it's like everyone had their big name. Kansas City's got Bobby Witt. I'm like, well, I'll be honest with you. Bobby Witt and Kansas City's entire minor leagues, I would not trade for Cleveland's. Like, I don't think the depth in Cleveland is something that is just, most places didn't have Stephen Kwan as a top 10 guy.
Saved the game for them in that
Yeah,
game. And
and I'm not saying he's going to do what he did in the early going. Like Oscar Gonzalez is an afterthought because of some of this. The top, they have the youngest team in baseball for the second year in a row. They're keeping Jose. They made a few deals to lock a few players up, but the top prospects haven't even hit yet. The guys who are potentially difference makers aren't even in yet. Like, this is a young team. They're still figuring out like what places fit together. But I thought they'd be better than a year ago, because a year ago they were, an 80-ish win team, and they didn't lose anyone. And the young talent was just starting. Like, I mean, this is a team last year. The number 2 player in terms of plate appearances for an outfielder was Harold Ramirez. Number 1 was Bradley Zimmer. They've moved on to with, again, it's all the young guys starting to slowly get that opportunity. It's like I said, I thought people were sleeping on him. That was one of those things. I was like, your depth. It's what we learn in all sports, maybe except for basketball, but like NFL and MLB and even hockey to a degree. It's like the high pick isn't always as valuable as having a bunch of seconds. It's like having that depth matters so much, because you never know. Like, Jose Ramirez was not a top 100 prospect ever. He was the other Jose Ramirez. The Yankees pitching prospect Jose Ramirez was the big name. Shane Bieber wasn't a top 100 guy. Manuel Clase wasn't. Franmil Reyes wasn't. None of these guys were. And then you go to the other side of it. It's like Andrew Benintendi's having a great year this year, but do people remember that he was the number 1 prospect in baseball? Like, sometimes those guys, it's never a strict developmental path. It's never necessarily a straight line. Guys go up, guys go down. Few guys just, are Juan Soto and just hit and never have an issue. So I think it's the depth is really important. And I think that's kind of what hurts Colorado to a degree. It's like, looking at their prospects, I mean, Ryan Velotti has been like a top prospect, it feels like, for half a decade now, like consistently in their top 5. They've had high picks, but they just haven't been able to build up any depth of the system or consistently, it feels like, draft and develop. And I feel like that's what, I know there's a lot of things that hold them back, but just as that outside observer, it's like I look at the prospects now, and it's like Drew Romo is a great story, because like he is outperformed. Like that's come together well. Hassel was not Hassel, Dean, the other outfielder from that class, was a solid pick. It's like Benny Montgomery is a big risk type, but I'm curious to see what they'll do, how they'll keep doing it. But I feel like that's kind of the difference when I look at these like systems and look at these teams with like just going forward from here. It's like Cleveland still just has depth. Like Gavin Williams is 8th ranked in their system, and he just got added to the pipeline top 100. So it's why I'm very thankful, and it's why like having that management matters so much.
The depth isn't there. There's a couple of exciting. Toglia is exciting. Velalde, you mentioned, is exciting. There's a couple of people, but there's no one that really makes you like very, very, very excited right now. As they develop, it could be. I think Benny Montgomery has the potential to be really cool. I think the combo of Montgomery and Zach Veen, if that works out, can be an interesting outfield for the Rockies in the post Chris Bryant era. But here's the deal. 2 of your best developed players no longer play for you. And one of them was under an 8-year deal and was going to be here for the long haul and was a generational player. And the other one is now playing second base in Boston. The Rockies aren't a draft and develop team. I'm kind of tired of. The Rockies don't have a true identity other than signing old vets to come and see if they'll get an offensive resurgence at Coors Field, and to say they're draft and develop, to hide behind the fact that they're not good at red front office management. This should be a golden era of Colorado Rockies baseball, and instead it is a terrible time. The Rockies should be in championship contention, led by Nolan Arenado and Trevor Story. This is a team that had Nolan Arenado, Trevor Story, and DJ LeMahieu in their infield not even 5 years ago. It's a constant disappointment, and it's really tough, honestly. It's really starting to wear on me because Chris Bryant has not played at all. this year. You could have gotten Castellanos and Schwarber for less than Chris Bryant, and they would have been an interesting pair, but you have that already huge logjam. You already have players that, what are you going to do with Sam Hilliard? What are you going to do with some of these players that have been on the team for a bit? Those old prospects that haven't really developed into anything much. The Rockies are very much stuck in the mud. But Jeff, it's exciting to hear good stuff from Cleveland, Ohio. Very near and dear to my heart. I'm a Bobcat myself, an OU Bobcat from Athens. A lot of Cincinnati ties. And Mark in the chat says, always been a fan of Francona. Used to watch him and Tim Raines play here for the Denver Bears at the time as an Expos AAA affiliate. But Jeff, anything left on this series before we wrap it up? I know we didn't dive too much into this series, but again, there wasn't necessarily a lot of quality baseball. I think the more interesting conversation is the philosophies of these two teams and the two different directions they seem to be going.
Yeah, it's even something small like, I know I'm talking long here, but it's like I was a huge fan of Taron Vavra back in the day, who I think they traded for Michael Givens. It's like he is the perfect analytical darling, like son of a coach, young for his age, performed as a cold weather player, like all those indicators we look for, all those ones I've been trained to look for. One of those indicators that often people don't know about is like BABIP in college and low minors is not luck. It's actually a sign of like hit ability, like a player having a potential plus hit tool. And I mean, you look at him, I'm not saying he's going to necessarily be a star, but I just pulled him up. But it's like so far this year, he's got, he's never had a season in the minors with an OPS under 800. And, he's moving through the systems. He's playing in AAA right now with an 864 OPS and 81 at bats. Like he was not a top 10 guy. When I was writing for Scout, he was my favorite pick in that draft class. But that's exactly the type of guy that like an organization can't afford to miss on. And a guy that like, if you're a little more of an analytical bend, he is not the one you're willing to trade away. You're like, there's a little bit of too much of a chance there. So it's just things like that where I go back and I look at stuff and those players I think about where I'm like, why was he the guy they traded? Like they could have given a lot of, and I know why Baltimore targeted him. I know Baltimore has that high analytical base and they also know all those indicators and they're like, well, can we get him? And for whatever reason, it was like, yeah, well, he's not a great athlete. He's not this, but it feels like just outside observer, it feels like Colorado is stuck kind of like in this, pre-Moneyball, go for big guys and go for big guys who throw hard, hit the ball hard, and are athletes. We're not going to look at, can they make contact? We're not going to look at things like spin rates and tunneling. We're not going to look at all of that data the team like the Guardians mines heavily. We're just going to look, are they big? Do they throw hard? Do they hit the ball hard? And then it ends there. And I mean, sometimes it works out, but it's also why I feel like there's been so many misses.
I would rather the Rockies go to approach. Give me 9 Connor Joes. Give me 9 Connor Joes. Give me people with one Connor Joe being able to hit more home runs, one Connor Joe being a little faster. But I'd rather have that type of player. That's why the Giants are so good. I swear. The Giants don't have names. They don't have big names that you're going to hear often, but they're going to come into your ballpark. They're going to score 8 runs in 3 games in a row because they're going to double you to death. And then someone's going to hit you a ball out the yard. But, it was it's been frustrating, but Jeff, we're going to get ready to wrap things up here. Where can people go to stay up to date with all things Guardians and yourself?
Yeah, I want to agree. Daza was a very bright spot. I said Mark mentioned someone I was not familiar with before the series. So I would say when things get bad, look at him.
He was potentially not having a spot on the lineup. I mean, he's good because he's faster in the outfield and played better defense. His offensive surge has been awesome.
Yeah, it was a nice, as a fan of baseball, it was a nice little discovery as I watched this series. You can follow me on Twitter at JeffMLBDraft. That's where I do everything from, talking about the draft. That is still a big passion of mine, to, a lot of Guardians base coverage. It's like, I would say nowadays about 70% Guardians, 30% draft. As we get 5 weeks out, you might start tipping a little bit more. But that's a primary. I'm always happy to get more subscribers on the YouTube side of it. That's always a hard thing for all of us over in the baseball world. But if you follow me on Twitter at JeffMLBDraft, check out Locked On Guardians if it's your thing. And like I said, even if you're not like, I don't care about the Guardians, might be worth perusing as we get closer to the draft. I mean, I've dropped like my top 30 players. I did a crossover mock last week with Lindsay. You can go find out who I think I had the Rockies picks. You can go find out who I mocked to the Rockies with that selection.
Jeff's been covering the game for a long, long time. You're not going to get a lot better coverage than what Jeff does over there. Jeff MLB Draft. For you Guardians fans, I'm at Paul Holden 33. I'm Paul Holden. I am your big Rockies goober type of guy. I'll always love this team as much as they make me want to pull my hair out and frustrating. And as we get to sit here, I get to have all the fun. I get a little jealous. The Broncos podcast gets to talk about this whole new look Broncos team. The Nuggets get a back-to-back MVP. The Avalanche are in the Stanley Cup Finals, and the Rockies are now 10 games below 500. So it's been a blast. But yeah, it is, folks. If you're listening, your subscription on YouTube is a massive, massive help to your favorite Locked On host. So go give Locked On Guardians, go give Locked On Rockies a sub on YouTube. And when you do, you can pop in the live chat, just like Mark and Hart did here in our live chat as well. But Jeff, thank you again so much for the time.
No problem. I was just going to ask on the way out, is Joe Rock your favorite minor leaguer with the Rockies OU tie in there?
I did get, I mean, I am pretty excited. I was very pumped. It was very cool. I did an interview with the voice of the Bobcats, Russ Eisenstein, about it. I am very much, you can't see it, but I got a Jackie O's poster up here. So anytime Bobcats get to interweave with professional anything, and then it's Rockies related, it can't get much better than that. And what better last name to have for a Rockies player than Rock? But for Jeff, I'm Paul Holden, and we're saying so long from the Locked On Podcast Network.